Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and why there is no quarterback competition coming to the Steelers training camp in Latrobe this year. I'm Ron John. This is Steelers Therapy. Let's get into it. So first off, there's a bunch of media pundits and people, trying to hype up this QB competition between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And it's really just nonsense. And I'm going to tell you why. So I'm a business leader, experienced in running businesses, supporting executives. I'm also a seasoned military veteran. I was a senior noncommissioned officer, and I would support senior officers in training and readying soldiers to go overseas and conduct operations. And I even, had overseas deployments myself. So I have a very unique perspective on how football operations work. And I'm going to share that with you so you can better understand how decisions are made and how football training and operations work. So let's start with this. When it comes to training in the National Football League, it's about individual and collective training. When Mike Tomlin talks about that individually and collectively, those aren't Tomlinisms. The U.S. Army uses those terms exclusively to refer to how we train and how we prepare soldiers. So first off, you have to be proficient from an individual perspective. You've got to be able to do what your job says you're supposed to do individually. So for a soldier, they have to be able to shoot. They have to be able to get down, get up. They have to be able to use the radio. They have to be able to do a bunch of things that are really just them individually training and getting proficient on them. In football, it's the same thing. If you're a receiver, you have to be able to catch the ball. If you're an offensive lineman, you need to explode off the line quickly and have the right technique. So it's the same thing. You have to make sure all of your folks are individually prepared, and that's how you assess them from an individual perspective. But that's really actually one of the least important parts in anything, although it is the fundamentals of being individually proficient. But when we go on the field, when we perform, we do it collectively. So for the U.S. Army, you don't just have to shoot by yourself or, do individual movements by yourself, use communications, render aid to soldiers. You have to be able to do these things collectively. So for an infantry unit or operation, you have to be able to move as a team. Your team has to be able to move within a squad within a platoon within a company battalion division, so on, or brigade, so on and so forth. And the higher up you go, the more complex those collective operations get. You are now part of an entire system of people that are working individually and collectively to accomplish a specific objective. And you can even go further on in joint operations between, land and sea and things like that, where the collective nature gets incredibly complex. And from an individual perspective in the U.S. Army, you are trained and assessed typically by non-commissioned officers. But as you get to the collective level, you're getting to officers. And then as you get higher at the collective level, you're getting to senior officers who have that responsibility. So let's relate this to football. In football, if you're an offensive lineman, you're not just blocking one person. You're moving as a member of a team, as you have to block for a certain play. If you're a receiver, you're not just running your route by yourself. There's other routes to be run. There's blocking schemes. There's all kinds of things happening to hopefully open a window for you so the quarterback has time to throw the ball to you. So everybody has to do their part. And individually, it's probably position coaches that are assessing these guys. But from a collective perspective, you get into the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, the head coach that has the responsibility for the collective performance of that team. Now, why do I say all that? Well, when it comes to Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, they're going to go through training camp and they're going to go through all of this. And why it's important is, essentially the Steelers are going to be assessing both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson on a little bit different of a scale. And I'll give you an example of my time overseas so you can better understand. When I went overseas, my team leader was fantastic. And he was a sergeant. but he wasn't technically qualified to be a sergeant. He had to get a waiver. He hadn't gone through the preliminary leadership development course training he was supposed to go through. He wasn't a great shooter. He would, do halfway decent on the individual shooting qualification, but nothing special. He rarely would participate in individual drills with us, as we would, have to do all kinds of movements and things to showcase our proficiency or showcase our ability to conduct aid or, to navigate a map and things like that. And even when we would train collectively, oftentimes he wasn't there. He would delegate that to, somebody underneath of him to perform as the team leader. And in certain circumstances, when we needed to be approved and have our training evaluated, he would be there. And when he was there, he would do a good job, but he would almost kind of go at half speed. He would never really, kill himself in doing these things. And he was a seasoned veteran. He had been to Iraq. He had been to Afghanistan. This was his third or fourth deployment. He kind of already knew what was to be expected. And he knew, not to ruin his body or the need to try so hard, as we did as 18, 19, 20-year-olds who were just throwing ourselves in every training assessment to perform as best we could. And during this, though, one of the guys underneath of him had that preliminary leadership development training course. He wasn't a sergeant, but he had the qualifications to be a sergeant. He was a fantastic shooter. He was an expert shooter. He was really an expert at everything he did. He was, strong, physically fit. He was a super soldier, but he didn't have experience overseas. He was younger and he showed great promise. And really on paper, if you were to look at them, you would go, oh, this is the guy that you would need to make your team leader. Or if somebody were evaluating, they might go, hey, this is the guy that needs to be the team leader. So what does this all mean? How do you relate this back to football? Well, let's go to Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. So Russell Wilson has been there, done that. He's a Super Bowl winner. He's been to another Super Bowl. He's proven over and over again he is a starting quarterback. Even though he may have flamed out with the Broncos really didn't have great talent. Sean Payton isn't that great of a coach, and Russell Wilson wasn't a great fit. And as they bring him into the Steelers, it's already been decided. Russell Wilson is the starter. There is no quarterback competition. I don't care how many people go to training camp and keep stats about how many interceptions Russ throws, how much he plays with the first team, how much he doesn't, all those things, how great Justin Fields looks. It's just clickbait for you. There is no QB competition. It doesn't matter. Justin Fields definitely has all the talents in the world. He's got all the characteristics of, an up-and-coming quarterback. Although, again, he flamed out in Chicago. He had several games where he took over the game, where he had 4+ touchdowns, both running and passing. So, on paper, people may say, well, he's got the talents, he's got the skills, he's the guy. Russ, he's older, he's washed up, he's this and that. And people could have said that about my team leader who was older and maybe washed up from other deployments. But when we got overseas, my team leader's experience was palpable. It was discernible. You could see it. He knew exactly what to do. He knew exactly how to react when there were sticky situations. And, the super soldier that was underneath of him really didn't. Really just knew how to follow that team leader. Now, I'm sure if my team leader wouldn't have performed, they probably would have replaced him with that super soldier, but ultimately he did. And that's what the Steelers are banking on with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Russell Wilson isn't going to kill himself in training camp to compete with Justin Fields. He isn't going to go full speed. He's 35 years old. Justin Fields is going to have all kind of camp darling conversations and, he may usurp Russell Wilson, but it's just not true. Russ and the Steelers have already made the decision. Russell Wilson is the starting quarterback. If during the season Russell Wilson flames out, he doesn't do well, like to a Kenny Pickett type level, I'm sure the Steelers will probably give Justin Fields a shot. But until then, Russ is going to be given every opportunity to start and prove himself to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, when you think about this, I want you to think about Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. So it didn't matter what anybody saw in training camp. And there were people, oh, Kenny Pickett, he's really doing well. And Mason Rudolph struggled a little bit. And, you know, Kenny Pickett is the darling of preseason, won 4 preseason games, does his little dance thing after a touchdown. And then what did we see during the season? During both seasons for Kenny Pickett? He's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. He's probably in the bottom tier of backup quarterbacks. He simply can't throw touchdowns. He can't command an offense. His confidence is low. He's not the guy. But the Steelers already made the decision. They made the capital investment in him as a first-round draft pick. They told him he was going to start. They committed to it. So it didn't matter what things looked like in training camp, what things looked like in preseason. And Mason Rudolph knew that. And if you think Mason Rudolph was going full speed, you probably want to think again. He knew he wasn't going to start. Why ruin his body? Why kill himself in training camp and things like that? Just sit back and wait for his opportunity. And then what did we see when Mason Rudolph got in there? I mean, it was night and day difference. Now, I'm not saying Mason Rudolph was a starting quarterback or should be our starting quarterback, but he performed significantly better than Kenny Pickett. And to be honest, a lot of the coaches probably knew that. They probably advised the Steelers that, hey, this is our best quarterback. But Steelers brass, you know, when we talk about GMs, owners, coaches, we really don't know who has the pull. But what we do know is the Steelers committed to Kenny Pickett. And Mason Rudolph simply wasn't going to get a shot, even though he was obviously the better quarterback. So when these media pundits and stuff, and Rich Eisen is a clear example. I like Rich Eisen, but all he has been doing has been hyping up this Justin Fields quarterback competition with Russell Wilson. You know, a lot of people from Denver or, you know, enemies of Seattle, Russell Wilson, have been, you know, saying he's washed up and this, that, and the other thing. Be that as it may, Russell Wilson is going to start. He's got the pedigree. He's got the Super Bowls. Last year, he performed actually, from a statistical perspective, pretty decently. Now, people say stats aren't everything, but he threw twice as many touchdowns as the Steelers had all season, I think, from all quarterbacks. Russell Wilson is going to give the Steelers the best opportunity to come out of the gate, be competitive, and win. Justin Fields isn't just an insurance policy. He could be, you know, the Steelers' next great starting quarterback in waiting. He's got plenty of tools. He's got it all. But ultimately, he doesn't have the experience Russ does. He doesn't have the experience in the wins that Russ has and knows what needs to happen. And ultimately, like I said, Russell Wilson is going to start. So that's kind of, you know, my thoughts on today. We could expound a little bit more on this topic, but I don't want to beat it to death. So what do you think? Do you think Russell Wilson is the de facto starter, or do you think there is a real QB competition going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers? I'd love to hear about it. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. Once again, I'm Ron John. This is your weekly Steelers therapy session. I hope we were able to get a lot off our chest today. Tune in next time, and we'll talk soon.